With Hardball's David Shuster and his report on General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker's testimony on the Hill today.
8 months after the Bush administration began a troop escalation, today General David Petraeus testified that in parts of Iraq the violence has begun to drop, and he urged Congress to keep the higher U.S. troop levels going.
The military objectives of the surge are in large measure being met. Coalition and Iraqi security forces have achieved progress in the security arena.
But using charts and graphs, Petraeus said the ongoing levels of violence are of concern. And Petraeus did not testify about the lack of political progress, in other words, about the reason we are fighting the war. Earlier this year, President Bush said political reconciliation was crucial. And Mr. Bush said the goal of the U.S. escalation was to give Iraqi leaders breathing room to pass legislation.
The Iraqi government needs to show real progress in return for America's continued support and sacrifice.
Today, Ambassador Ryan Crocker acknowledged Iraq's government has not met any of the crucial political benchmarks. And when Crocker was asked whether the next 6 months would be any different,
I frankly do not expect that we are going to see rapid progress through these benchmarks.
Lawmakers on both sides noted the Iraq war is stretching the U.S. military to the breaking point. Petraeus acknowledged those concerns, said he plans to cut about 5,000 forces by the end of the year and intends to reduce force levels by another 30,000 by the middle of 2008.
I believe that we will be able to reduce our forces to the pre-surge level of brigade combat teams by next summer, without jeopardizing the security gains that we have fought so hard to achieve.
The troop levels next summer, however, would still be at about 139,000, the number in Iraq just before the escalation began. Democrats were infuriated.
We need to get out of Iraq for that country's sake and for our own. It is time to go, and to go now.
According to a new poll of Iraqis by 3 international news organizations, anger with the United States is growing. 61% of Iraqis say the U.S. troop surge has worsened Iraq's security, political stability, and pace of development. 47% want the U.S. to withdraw immediately, and 57% of Iraqis now say attacks on U.S. forces are acceptable. That's up 7 points from January. General Petraeus and Ambassador Crocker testified the most spectacular attacks are coming from an offshoot of al-Qaeda. That sparked the most contentious exchange of the hearing.
Isn't it true, General, al-Qaeda in Iraq formed in 2005, 2 years after we first got there?
I'm not saying when it started. I'm saying merely that al-Qaeda Iraq clearly is part of the overall greater al-Qaeda network.
But they didn't exist.
Overall, the tone of the session today was matter-of-fact and polite. But there were plenty of unusual moments. Even before Chairman Skelton could get into his opening statement, protesters began to interrupt.
We're going to have no disturbances in this room, and those that disturbed are immediately asked to be escorted out. Do that right now.
Then, after 45 minutes of statements from committee members, when it was time for General Petraeus to testify, his microphone didn't work.
I don't want to have to take a recess. Let's get it fixed.
And as the committee waited for audio technicians, Republican Dan Burton and Democratic Committee Chairman Skelton tangled over the prospect of more protests.
You don't have to lecture me on. They'll be gone.
Well, I still see them out there.
Don't worry about them. We've done this before.
A few minutes later,
please remove them.
Some Democrats went into the hearing convinced that Petraeus would simply state the White House talking points. Petraeus testified he wrote his own report with no White House help. Still, the left-wing group MoveOn.org slammed Petraeus this morning in the New York Times.
The general betray us.
Republicans objected, as did the White House.
There's fair comment, but this is outrageous.
Lost in that debate, however, was an announcement today from the Pentagon that more U.S. troops had been killed in Iraq. The total number of U.S. troops killed now stands at 3,759. The number injured is over 27,000. And yet today, while there was a lot of talk about military tactics, there was hardly any discussion about how long it will take to meet the overall goal of a stable Iraq that can function on its own. Instead, the violence continues and the U.S. sacrifice grinds on, and today's hearing only underscored that there is no end in sight. I'm David Shuster for Hardball in Washington.
Thank you, David.